Love, love, till I feel the breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Welcome to Spirit of Life. Norm Currie is my name, and today I'm speaking with David Schutz. David, thanks for making yourself available for interview today.
Pleasure.
I've been doing some research, and if it serves me well, you're the Executive Officer of the Ecumenical and Interfaith Commission and Secretary of the Jewish Christian Muslim Association of Australia. And our purpose today is to discuss interfaith from its numerous aspects. To begin, perhaps I might quote from a description of yourself, which I read in my research. And you stated this: I'm a Catholic, married to Kathy, father of Maddie and Mia. Since 2002, I've been an Executive Officer of the Ecumenical and Interfaith Commission of the Archdiocese of Melbourne. I was once a Lutheran pastor, but a year of grace and soul-searching led me into the Catholic Church. It was a bumpy ride, but with support from my still Lutheran wife, I was finally confirmed on June 16, 2003. Would you mind illuminating that soul-searching which led me into the Catholic Church after that long introduction?
In my family, it's Lutherans all the way down. My family is an old Lutheran family from South Australia. For that matter, my wife's family are an old Lutheran family here from Melbourne. I entered the Lutheran Church following the Lutheran ministry following a call that I sensed from God into that work. I always was attracted to a Catholic expression of Christianity because I saw that as being an authentic form of Christianity. I guess over the years, as I tried to work out what it meant to be Catholic, there were so many different varieties of definitions that I came down to the only concrete definition that one could take hold of was to be in communion with the Bishop of Rome. As I searched more into my own tradition, Lutheran tradition, more into history, grew in understanding what the Catholic Church was, I determined that in terms of authenticity, continuity, and authority, ultimately as well, the Catholic Church was the church to which I was duty-bound to seek communion in. But that, of course, raised numerous issues for my personal circumstances, my work, my vocation, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
And marriage too, and family, of course.
Yes. And that year of grace, what was that?
I'm rather amused actually, because I chose the term Year of Grace quite some time ago for a blog where I put my entire diary that I kept during that year from Easter 2000 through to Easter 2001. It's quite a dateable period of 12 months from when I first realized I was going to have to make this move to when I actually did. And the grace along the way was largely to have the courage to do that. We should never underestimate the courage it takes for people to enter the Catholic Church, especially for clergy of other Christian communities to do that.
It would make a very interesting interview to interview you about your diary and take you through that stage by stage, because, as you say, it's very challenging. Now you've had the courage to do it, and it's some 10 years pretty much since you did it.
That's right.
How's the change been? What's been the internal movements in relation to that?
I was asked to write an essay recently for a collection of essays by Abe Attar from Melbourne University on Catholicism and Catholics in Australia, in contemporary Australia, I think that's the title, in which he asked me to reflect on the cultural changes. There are cultural and religious differences. One is simply that the Catholic Church is so big.
Yes.
Even dealing in ecumenical work with other Christian churches or interfaith work with other religions, we have to acknowledge the fact that the Catholic Church is the largest slice of Christians on the planet, and the Christians are the largest single religious group on the planet. So you belong to a universal religion And it fascinates me that, that this huge number of people are governed and shepherded by around about 6,000 bishops, all of whom are in communion with one person. So we've got only two layers of separation. And I think that communion of the people with the bishops and the bishops with the Pope is a good recipe for unity.
Mm. Yes, that's a very interesting description of what it is about the Catholic Church. It's got limitless or almost limitless resources.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a TARDIS experience, you know. From someone outside, the Catholic Church looks like just another denomination amongst all the others.
Yes.
And you walk through those doors, and it's immense on the inside.
Yes. And the influence of the Pope, you find that central authority, you were able to adjust to that reality?
Yes. My day blog, which I think you were researching on, where you got that description from, is called Sentire cum Ecclesia, which is the Latin terms for to think with the Church. And I found the only way in my own spiritual life to progress with any certainty, the only way for me to relate to others, whether they be other Christians or other religions, or even people of no faith, is for myself to think with the Church, to take that stand with the Church, to learn from the Church, and to walk with her.
Yes.
Yeah. And that means, of course, walking with the Pope as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It gives the faith a depth, and that certainly is important when you compare the way in which some faiths are limited by the narrowness of their perspective, and we won't discuss.
It's more to the case that people can be limited by their own individual perspective.
Yeah.
With the Catholic Church, you never are on your own in terms of perspective.
At that point, let's take a break. You're watching Spirit of Life. Join us after the break. Welcome back to Spirit of Life. We're speaking with David Schutz from the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne. David, let's go on to the Ecumenical Interfaith Commission, which was the beginning of this ecumenical process, I think, in the 60s, was it?
Well, Archbishop Knox, as he was then, came back from the Second Vatican Council, and the Second Vatican Council had issued two landmark documents, one on ecumenism, on church unity, or unity amongst Christians, the seeking of full visible unity amongst Christians. The other was on relations with other religions. The Council directed bishops to establish in their diocese commissions to deal with Christian unity. So a true son of the Second Vatican Council, Archbishop Knox, later Cardinal Knox, came back and established in 1967 this commission. It was possibly one of the first in the world to be established, and so it's been going continuously since then. These days, the interfaith side of things probably didn't get so much attention at the time because there weren't structures put in place. The ecumenical journey came with road rules, came with even with people who knew how to drive. It came even with a model for a car to be built, so that we could drive the thing almost as soon as the word go was there. We had to do a lot more growing into relations with other religions. And that developed largely during the 1990s, from earlier pioneering work by others. By the late 1990s, the Ecumenical Affairs Commission, as it was called, was changed to the Ecumenical and Interfaith Commission. And then came 2001, and after that, interfaith relations was on for young and old throughout, at every level of society. But we were already there, we were already established to move into that with some strength. And I came in June 2002, so just 6 months after, or even less, that event, and I've seen it develop since then.
So the council today, or the commission today, looks quite different to the original councils.
Yes. The original commission would have been made up of, in fact, it had 22 members. We're smaller than that these days, a much more streamlined group of workers with a lot of volunteer helpers. But there were mainly clergy and religious, with one or two lay people. In fact, one of our dear lay people, by the name of Basil Johns, has just recently retired after 40 years on the commission. And we tried to find an appropriate way to mark such a lot of such a hard work.
What a contribution. Yes. So this addition of the interfaith element of it, and the implication that growth since 9/11, just what's that growth look like? Is it?
What does it look like? It looks, earlier on, if things were done between religions, it was usually some kind of religious or semi-religious event that you got together, and people wearing exotic clothing and outfits and praying prayers in different languages or something like that. These days, it looks far more like Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus sitting down at a table, working together on various projects and things within the community.
Yes.
It's moved away from the novelty and has become a working model for building a harmonious society in which we live.
That reminds me of some of the discourse we've had in the past about the Jewish Christian Muslim Association. That's a classic example, isn't it?
It's a perfect example of how we developed. We had our first winter conference in 2004. It was just a conference, it was just a meeting when it first happened. There was a great deal of nervousness and it was very new. These days when the events take place, there's more comfort with one another. In fact, we're very comfortable with one another. And we're working together on other projects such as our schools project, putting presenters on the three faiths into schools, working with, even looking at things like interfaith sports and these sorts of projects. Yes. So it's a lot more, it's a lot more everyday.
Yes.
You know?
It's a real maturation of the process. Yeah. Yes. Have you got any perspective as to what you think it might evolve into? What's the evolutionary path, would you say?
On our website, on our commission website, the Ecumenical and Interfaith Commission website, there is a history which you can read. It's a complete history, published history of ecumenism within the Melbourne Catholic Archdiocese up to about 95. And the title of that is Journey Begun, Destination Unsighted. I think that could go for the interfaith relations as well. We've certainly begun the journey. We're well on the journey. But where that will go, I'm not sure. We are the most I was going to say cosmopolitan, that's not the word, the most varied community on the face of the planet in terms of countries that our people in our community have come from. There, 25% of people born elsewhere. 50% if you include the next generation. Now, all of this means we are trying to form a multicultural society in which faith is a part of that mix.
Yes, that's of which faith is part of the mix. So it's no longer just floating on the surface like oil on water. It's
or even completely ignored, as at one stage governments could ignore it.
Right.
Now it's very much a part of their program.
Thank you, David. You're watching Spirit of Life, and we'll be back after this brief break.
Spirit flowing in me.
Welcome back to The Spirit of Life. We're speaking with David Schutz from the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne. David, further to consideration of the Vatican Council, as you mentioned, Archbishop Knox was responding to that. And I've got a quote here about dialogue, and it indicates that other religions should have a substantial say and be willing to be listened to in depth. And the participants want to hear the authentic tradition which has been really experienced and truly lived. Mm. How does that inform
dialogue was an important word for Pope Paul VI. Mm-hmm. He wrote an entire encyclical on the topic where he expressed that there are many ways in which the Church can communicate its evangelizing mission. Traditionally, preaching, catechesis, teaching, but there was a new form of communication, especially appropriate for what in the 60s was happily called the modern world, which was dialogue or conversation with one another, where it's not one talking to another, but it's two talking to each other with their ears open. The Jews have a lovely saying, God gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth, just so we got the proportions right in listening and speaking. So yes, something substantial to say. We speak from where we are. We have an identity, we have beliefs, we have understandings of reality. We speak about those. The other who is speaking to us has a similar place where they stand. We want to hear where they are standing as well. It's the first step in communication,
yes,
rather than jumping in with preaching or trying to teach them as if they're ignorant.
Yes, yes. And that's the emphasis from the Second Vatican Council here about that. Now, this dialogue, does it have components? It
certainly does,
yes.
It's not all... People hear dialogue and they think clergy or theologians sitting down with monks and rabbis and whatnot and imams and nutting out the existence of God and all of this, arguing over the Trinity and whatnot. That is a part of dialogue. That's the dialogue of the theological dialogue, dialogue of religious understanding. But there is also the dialogue of religious experience, to actually get into the shoes of the other, to visit their places of worship, to see how they worship, to understand what prayer, for instance, means for them. That's the dialogue of religious experience. Then there would be the dialogue of everyday life. Now, that is the dialogue that most of our viewers will be involved in, because they will have Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist neighbours, and it's the dialogue that takes place over the back fence, down at the football ground, over a beer or a cup of tea.
Yes.
It's just living with one another. Finally, there's the dialogue of action, when you have built connections between religious communities and religious persons of different religion. You can then work together for common causes. And so you can show the principles that are in common in your faith traditions by working together on a cause that serves that faith tradition in both communities.
That's very interesting, because that's an indication of the evolution of interfaith, where it's broken, started to really understand what talking is about, communicating is about. One of those is one which is freewheeling, is the one of the community one, where people are interfacing with one another. Everyday
experience.
Yes. The others are quite structured. How are they, like, take for example the first of them, the theologians
well,
together?
One way that happens quite often these days is that we will choose a topic to reflect upon, and it will take place in a seminar or a conversation point of view. The Catholic Ecumenical and Interfaith Commission has a subcommittee which is completely open to any Catholic in Melbourne interested in being involved in interfaith work, called the Catholic Interfaith Committee. Not a very imaginative name, but what they do is imaginative. They find many different ways of interacting with other communities. One of our regular models is the conversation, in which about a dozen of our folk a dozen of their folk will come together on a particular topic. We will have someone speak on that topic, someone respond from the other side, and the other side will speak on the topic in a response there. There'll be afternoon tea and general fellowship involved with that as well. And that will just go for 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon quite regularly. And that advances a little bit further our conversation. Or there might be a particular issue. We just had a very big discussion on Pius XII and his action during the Holocaust, hosted by 2 Jewish groups, or one of them being the Council for Christians and Jews, which is a Christian-Jewish group. They invited us along to be a part of that. 300 to 350 people turned up to hear experts talking on different points of view on that. Not theology, but still an issue that needs to be talked about.
Absolutely. Yep. That's fascinating, because that is really grounding it, is by bringing the committee in like that. It's not high flow and up in the upper echelon here. It's actually where it's happening. And when you match that in with the social interface, that's very, very positive stuff. And the last of them, of the 4, which escapes me now, but when you said it, I thought
the dialogue of action.
That's right. Yes, the dialogue of action.
In truth, the dialogue of action is the hardest, because you already have to have established a good working relationship. At the same time, you have to have a clear goal, so that the two can come together and you can actually cooperate. But doing that helps you finally to learn how to live with one another, and can be very beneficial. And it's also a good witness to the community. The religions are not the cause of all wars. No. We can be the cause, and often have been the cause, of harmony within our society.
Thanks very much, David. We've covered quite a lot of territory with great explanations, but in fact you've opened up a lot. We'd like to follow the issue of dialogue through a bit more, and if you agree, we'd like to interview you next week. Would that be?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been watching Spirit of Life. Join us again next week.